Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Mayor and Council members and City Manager Darren Atterbury. I appreciate the invitation to address you. I also want to tell you how much I've appreciated your support as we've worked through these difficult issues with the coronavirus and COVID-19. As you know, in March, we were faced with a quickly moving scenario with transmission of the virus and made a critical decision in what felt like almost overnight to have our students go home and not return after spring break, which meant that we needed to convert all of our courses to remote learning. And I want to applaud the faculty for their very quick response. They were able to convert everything within 10 days. And in part, they were able to do that with support from our Institute for Teaching and Learning and our IT staff. One of the great concerns at that time was equity for our students. And so there was a tremendous effort made to supply students who did not have them with laptops that would support the technology that they needed for learning, and a lot of concern about equity, and that led us to leave some of our residence halls open for students who weren't able to go home or have optimal areas to study in. In addition, our employees were truly phenomenal, and that includes our housing and dining staff, our residence hall staff, all of our custodial staff, our police force. They all stepped up to do what was necessary, and I deeply appreciate what our employees did for the campus. In the meantime, I charged a pandemic preparedness team, or PPT, made up of experts on campus, experts in epidemiology and testing, in healthcare provision for students and employees, Army logistics personnel, and our emergency staff who are used to with all of our facilities. That pandemic preparedness team has been working with us continually, and they have been helping us make decisions with how we resume operations on campus. So we started out, as soon as the students were gone, we started mapping our road to recovery. Our budget was due to the board in May, so we had a 4-week turnaround to get our budget before the board. And we wanted to come up with some guiding principles for that budget, in part because we wanted to protect our workforce as much as we possibly could. And you'll see that we set forth some guiding principles, which was health and safety, fairness and equity, adherence to our land grant mission, rapid decision-making with inclusive input, which I know sounds like that would be an oxymoron, but we made it work, student access, affordability, and success, operational continuity beyond COVID-19. In other words, how do we position the university in this community to be able to resume operations beyond COVID-19 so that we're as thriving in operation after as we were before, and we hope even more so. And then our goal of trying to protect as many jobs as we possibly could. And here I just want to pause for a moment and say that our board was tremendously responsive to our interest in protecting our workers from layoffs and furloughs. And although it's always scary going into the future, not knowing what's ahead of us, I will say that we're very proud at this point that we were able to avoid layoffs. And we felt that that was not only important for our own campus, but for the Fort Collins community, to be able to keep as many people employed as possible. We established priorities, which was continuing to focus on excellent, innovative education that was accessible, inclusive, equitable, and designed for success of our diverse student body. Continue our transformative research, engage with Colorado communities who needed us more than ever before because of COVID. Again, protecting our workforce and focusing on finance so that we would have a sustainable financial future. What I did to be able to make the kinds of decisions we needed to make in an inclusive way, but a quick way, is that we formed these various working groups that you can see up there on the screen. They fed into a smaller recovery advisory committee, which then made ultimate recommendations to the president, provost, and chief financial officer. We then went to the board with those decisions. So because we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what's going to happen, we focused on three scenarios. The best case was we were able to come back for fall semester. Middle case was that we had to come back face-to-face later in the fall. And worst case, that we had to do fall semester completely remote. And I'm happy to say at this point that we believe that we can have a restoration of campus operations. But in order to reduce transmission and comply with state and county health guidelines, we've had to do some creative work around what it means to have on-campus operations with such a large student body. In putting together our budget for the upcoming year, I do want to make sure that for those of you who are engaged with our employees, we made sure that despite budget cuts, all of our promotions went forward, and that was for our tenure track faculty as well as our non-tenure track faculty. And probably most important for everyone on this is we continue to invest in public safety and invested additional money in mental health initiatives because we know how important they are in the current crisis. So obviously we had a lot of challenges. Our enrollment projections remain slightly below last year. Costs for COVID testing, tracking, sanitizing, quarantining, contact tracing, et cetera, is huge. Depending on what we do at any particular time and what the virus brings our way, we could be talking about anywhere between 10 million and 30 million additional dollars just to be able to do what we need to do to protect our students, our employees, and our guests. And again, there was a huge impact in the spring on housing and dining revenue, and there will be. The opportunities, and I always joked before the pandemic, never squander a crisis. And this is probably at least I hope it's the biggest one I will have faced in my presidency. And I see Andy laughing, which makes me feel better. But we have many, believe it or not, we have a lot of opportunities that are brought to us in meeting the challenges of the pandemic. And so it's an important time for campus as we work through and try to take advantage of those opportunities. So I'm going to go through the budget outlook very quickly. The most important thing for you to see here, and I'm sure Andy will speak to this as well, is that you can see our state allocation in FY 19-20 was more than double what it is in FY 2021. And so you can see that we've had just a significant decrease. And to put that in percentage numbers, the legislature cut state support by 58%. Fortunately for us, the state also had federal CARES Act money, which they allocated to the CSU system, and the CSU system provided enough money back to CSU Fort Collins to bring us up to equivalent of a 5% cut in the state revenue. But I wanted to show you this just really quickly because in addition to the losses, we also have a lot of increased expenses. And I mentioned those before in terms of our pandemic response, but we also had amazingly increased expenses around teaching. And I know that everyone immediately thinks it's cheaper to teach online than it is to teach in person, but it's actually more expensive. And so in addition to our online investments in our technology, we've also had significant additional teaching costs. I want to talk about that for a minute. This just gives you a quick breakdown of the budget. I wanted everyone to see it. I'm not going to go into detail, but the one thing I did want to show you is the CARES Act originally from the federal government was split 50-50, 50% being able to come to the institution to help offset some of the losses from March to June, 50% to provide students with funds that would help them through the pandemic from March to June. That had to do with housing, food security, technology, et cetera. So we have made permanent cuts to our base budget. These were not across the board cuts. Some units had 4% cuts, other units had 6% cuts, depending on their need and how much they might have had in reserves. We do expect significant shortfalls in fiscal year 22 and 23. And as Andy, I know, will say, we're in for a couple of years of a tough slide. Investing in diversity and equity, I just wanted to let you know we continue to do that and have taken it very seriously. And those are areas that we tried to cut as little as possible. We focused on campus, community, and personal safety during the course of when we did not have on-campus operations. Since the unrest in the United States in response to policing, Black Lives Matter, and the death of George Floyd, I actually commissioned a presidential task force on campus, community, and personal safety. And that task force is being chaired by Rico Munn, who is the superintendent of Aurora Schools and who was the board chair for the CSU system. He also is just a wonderful human being, and those of you who know him know that this puts us in a really good position for analyzing policing on campus. So return to campus. The most important thing for you to know is that we've put health and safety as the highest priority. We've converted our laboratories to CLIA certified labs so that we're able to do testing. All of our students who will be in residence will be tested upon arrival. They are given training on symptom reporting. They have an app that they'll be reporting daily. Our employees have an app that they will be reporting their symptoms daily. All students have been instructed to come with a symptom checking kit, and if they arrived without them, we'll be able to provide them. So in the first week, students who are in residence will be testing. We also have hired and mobilized contact tracers. And so as soon as any symptom is reported by an employee or by a student, that person will be contacted immediately. They will be tested immediately. We have the ability to have 24-hour response in our tests, and all of their contacts will be contacted. The person who tests positive will go into self-isolation, and the people who they've been in contact with will go into quarantine to make sure that we're not having them expose any of our employees or any other students. So that's the framework. So immediate testing when students arrive, continual testing. In addition, we've put screening mechanisms in place. So we will be screening and testing wastewater throughout campus on particular sites so that we're able to judge viral load and take precautions. We also have cleaning protocols, cleaning supplies, personal protection for our employees, for our faculty, and for our students. And we've built into our policies that these guidelines have to be adhered to. And if they're not adhered to, either students or employees will be subject to disciplinary procedures. So we're taking this very seriously. We're able to deliver courses in person, and we've been able to do that by combining both face-to-face experiences, online experiences, and hybrid experiences. This has been necessary by the 50% occupancy required both by the state and the county, which means we have to have many more sections of classes. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the planning that's gone into this. We roughly provide 7,000 classes per semester. So we've had to convert 7,000 classes to either face-to-face, hybrid, or fully online. In order to do that, we have to teach them more often because we can only have 50% occupancy in any spaces and have to provide the 6 feet of distancing. We have 1,000 classrooms available on campus. And so being able to organize those classrooms, make sure they're at 50%, and make sure that they're getting cleaned often enough and well enough to keep everyone safe has been a tremendous effort, but we believe that we are there and that we can provide the kind of safety that we need to provide. So we've had many creative solutions. Again, I can't say enough good things about everyone who works at CSU. Our faculty have been amazing. You can see we may have to expand classroom time to 4 to 8 and perhaps on Saturdays. We're hiring additional instructors to teach additional class sections, and we'll be providing instructors who are working online with continual training on how to do that in the best way possible. We've been running courses all summer for our faculty to enhance their online learning, and that has been a great success. So very, very happy to report that. So I've already gone over this, the COVID testing, the tracking, the contact tracing, and how we'll be dealing with teaching and learning, but I wanted to make sure that you had the slides to be able to refer back to. This I've also gone over with our campus precautions. Again, employee preparations. And the most important thing for me to say about this is that we're very, very sensitive to the fact that many members of our employees may be in vulnerable categories, and we have a system for people to be able to apply for accommodation. And we've expanded the definition of vulnerable. So there's 65 or older. There's underlying conditions that the person might have, him or herself. They may need to care for someone who is dependent on them and lives in the household, or they may need to care for someone who's dependent on them but does not live in their household, like an elderly parent, for example. In addition, we've made arrangements for those who will need childcare accommodations. And so if you're more interested in that, all of that is available on our website. And here's the URLs for information that you might be interested in looking back on to see for specific policies. The last thing I want to end on is, and I know Andy will pick up on this, is that we're dealing in a time of great uncertainty. So what I am telling you today is a snapshot of where we are at this moment in time. We understand that the disease is in control, that we must adhere to state and county guidelines. We want to be really good partners with the city in making sure that we're protecting all of our city residents as well. So you could invite me back next week, and it's possible that this would change, but I want to make sure that you understand where we are at this moment. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to present to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce, for your presentation. And now we'll go to President Dorsey.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager Atterbury, for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak as well. I'll start where Joyce left off, because I found a memo in a file yesterday that I had written on March 3rd saying to my leadership team, hey, we need to be ready to close as soon as the first week of April if this virus takes off. And then boom, 2 weeks later, we were like, oh, we got to close now because we're going to convert to online, and we need to give some folks some time to convert, and we need to give students time to get ready for it. I think that's been the exercise of the entire last 5 months, is figuring out how things might change. We originally thought that maybe we could have a summer semester like CSU. Our summer semester was almost entirely online. And as we headed into fall, we faced many of the same kinds of constraints. So probably our budget's even a little bit more tied to the state budget than CSU's. And we're fortunate that the CARES Act money backfilled many of the cuts, but we face some daunting challenges looking out into the future as we try to figure out what's going to happen when there is no more CARES Act money. It's really got us scratching our heads a little bit right now, but we're focused immediately on making sure we have the best experience for students possible going forward. Just a little bit of background, because I think folks are often surprised at who and what Front Range is. We actually serve about 28,000 students annually. And many of our students are part-time, so they're not going as intensively as a CSU student would. But that's quite a number of individuals over about 3 campuses and online. And we serve about 6,000 students at the Fort Collins campus in a typical semester. Plus, there's several other 100 students who are taking largely online courses in the area. Some days I wish I had athletics because it sounds pretty fun. But I think Joyce right now is wishing that she did not have, no, I'm sure she's not wishing she did not have athletics, but it just adds a whole nother wrinkle to have housing or athletics. We do not have either one. So that certainly simplifies some of the challenges compared to an institution like CSU. I talked to my other colleagues at community colleges that do have both of those, and it's a daunting task right now. And it certainly was daunting in the spring for them when they had to give refunds to folks who were leaving housing, quite a budget impact. About a third of our students come to take technical training, whether that's welding or auto repair or graphic design or nursing. Most of our students are part-time, a little older than the average college student. And we're 23% students of color on the Fort Collins campus. And we've a tremendous commitment to equity, to making sure that those students succeed at the same rate that white students succeed. We're close. We're not quite there. That's one of our key strategic goals over the next several years. And about a third of our students are first-generation college students. And just a few quick points of pride, and then I'll dive into more about how we're responding. We're one of the top community colleges in the country for transfer outcomes, in the top 10 of over 1,000 community colleges. If you start at Front Range, you have a 50% better chance than the average community college student in the country in achieving a bachelor's degree in 6 years. And really a big reason for that is our excellent relationships with four-year schools, in particular CSU. There's a link in there to a study through the Aspen Institute about the partnership between Front Range and CSU to improve transfer outcomes. It was called the Transfer Playbook, and they looked at this relationship to talk about how other colleges could model our cooperation in ensuring that students can transfer successfully. There's a new program statewide called Bridges to Bachelors, which allows students to apply and enroll at Front Range and CSU and other colleges at the same time and be guaranteed admission. That will only improve the transfer. And then we have one of the top nursing programs in the state. We also have our first bachelor's program at the Fort Collins campus, which is our Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. And this is our newest building, the Healthcare Career Center, which will house both of those programs. It should open in the next couple weeks, and it's on the corner of Harmony and Shield, so I imagine some of you may have driven by. As I said, we went online in the spring rather suddenly, and like Joyce said, I've really got to give a huge shout out to a whole bunch of faculty and staff who made that possible. Faculty who just rose to the occasion, took their spring break to figure out how to completely restructure their courses. IT staff who taught themselves how to use some technology that they'd never used so they could teach faculty, and our online learning folks who made it possible. And then the conversion of all our summer courses to our online was no mean feat either. And again, that was a lot of folks pulling together in a short time. We do have some programs working on campus right now for whom online isn't really suitable. And our campuses are open for folks who need advising, financial aid, counseling, things like that. Although what we've noticed is not a lot of students are showing up right now. It has been fascinating to see folks who never thought they could work effectively remotely figure out that advising appointments via Zoom actually work really well. And some of our younger students actually quite like working via video conferencing and not having to come in. So in preparing for fall, much like Joyce did, we put together a series of task forces. We surveyed all of our students. We got about 3,000 responses. We surveyed our faculty, our staff, trying to identify how we should proceed. So we start August 24th. We allow students to register up to the day classes start. We're having students register all throughout the summer. Unlike many four-year schools where students apply and are admitted and they have a pretty good sense of who's coming in the spring, we often don't have a good sense of who's coming until August 1 or August 10 or sometimes even August 20th. We also have a number of classes that start later in the fall. So we're planning with all of that in mind. Front Range also is known, as many community colleges are, for small classes, which generally is a plus. But when you have to do 6-foot social distancing in a room that typically holds 28 students, you quickly find out you might be able to fit 10 or 11. So that really made us think long and hard about how we could actually run classes on campus in a way that's even close to economical. We have very, very few large rooms. There's frankly only 2 rooms on the whole Larimer campus that can hold more than 30 students at a time. So our options of taking a class of 30 and putting it into a bigger room and holding it with 30 were pretty much nil. So that's driven a lot of our decisions moving forward. We really focused keeping campus open for our technical courses. So we'll have on campus courses like auto, welding, HVAC, our law enforcement academy, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, our nursing and our healthcare programs, our science labs, and some of our studio art programs. Most of those will be done using the lab time on campus and the didactic time or the lecture time online, usually through video conferencing. And we'll work it so that if a course was scheduled to be on a Monday and Wednesday, half the students will come on Monday for lab, the other half will come on Wednesday for lab, so we can meet the social distancing requirements. We'll continue to have student services on campus. A few years ago, we started a food bank, which at the time I didn't really know how important that would become to the campus. And it started in sort of the wake of the recession. But what has surprised me is the number of students who continue to rely on the food bank, even when times are good. It always surprises me every time I meet with our Student Government Association. At least one of the people in student government, not necessarily on this campus, but at least throughout our college, at least one of them is homeless or essentially homeless. That just tells you a little bit about the student body and the importance of services like that. So we're doing our best to keep those kinds of services and counseling, because mental health in this time has been really challenging for staff and for students. And we're also striving to keep our campuses open so the students can access Wi-Fi. For some of them, that's a big deal right now. As I mentioned, we've reconfigured our classrooms for 6-foot distancing. We've got plexiglass everywhere. I wish I had bought stock in a plexiglass company. Based on the amount we've spent, I'm sure it's the same at CSU and every place else that has service points for customers. We're working to expand testing. We don't have the scientific capacity on campus to do that, but we've been working with hospital partners in the area to develop more testing capacity for our students. And working on protocols so that students who come to campus will certify that they're following the kinds of guidelines that Joyce outlined. The rest of our fall schedule will largely be online. So our traditional lecture classes will be converted to largely online, English, math, psychology. And there'll be two different modalities. Some of them will be our traditional, what's called asynchronous online, where you can do your work at 3 in the morning. And some of them will be real-time remote video conference classes where you meet over a Zoom meeting quite like this. We've got some faculty who have really developed skills in figuring out how to do active engaged learning on Zoom, using breakout rooms, helping students form groups, some of which meet during class time, some of which meet on their own time. So I'm optimistic about the ability of this to meet the needs of our students. We acknowledge it's not the first choice, although we found from our student surveys that students were surprisingly interested in this. Students, I think, have some profoundly mixed feelings about being on campus. Some of them really want to be, some of them don't want to be. But we had significant space limitations, and for many of our faculty and students, this makes the most sense of allowing us to run an economic and robust schedule. It also allows us to preserve campus time for the students who are in classes that most need campus time. We're fortunate. We've got a rich history with online learning. We've been doing online learning since 1994. We were recently ranked one of the top 10 community colleges in the country for online learning. We've trained over 800 teachers in online pedagogy. We have offered most of the courses in our catalog that could be converted to online as online for over a decade. So we've got well-built out online shelves and a really good infrastructure for teaching online. And in fact, right before I got to this meeting, I just got an email from a student who said, I'm thinking about actually delaying my entrance to another 4-year school in the state that is not CSU because I'm just so impressed with taking one of your biology courses online in the summer. I didn't think it was possible to teach biology effectively online. Online's not for everybody, but we're doing our absolute best to make it a accessible medium for folks and to work with folks so that they can be successful in an online environment. I think the choice of classroom classes for the classes that need it the most, Zoom kind of real-time classes for students who want that kind of interaction, and asynchronous classes for students who learn better on their own, I think will meet the needs of all of our students. We're a little bit down in enrollment right now. We budgeted to be down about 7% for the year. We're a little bit more than that right now, but a lot of our students have been waiting to understand what happens 4-year schools, what happens with our course schedule. Just announced this plan about 2 weeks ago, and we'll have more details for how each individual section will work in about 10 days. So we imagine that a lot of our students are waiting for the last basically 3 weeks of summer to make their final decisions. That'll be a little challenging for us, but it's sort of par for the course. We've been through this before. In the recession in 2008, we grew about 40% in 2 years. So we are pretty nimble and flexible in responding to environments like this. I do have to just give a shout out to all of faculty, in particular at Front Range, but also our online and IT staff who have really risen to this challenge and have done a tremendous job in figuring out how we can pull this off. Going forward, I think we do have some big questions about how we're going to make this work in the state budget. My focus is on getting this semester started as successfully as possible and then turning to that in the fall. We've also been fortunate in that we've been able to sustain our staffing, haven't laid people off. In fact, in the spring, we were able to pay even the employees who weren't working in our student hourlies. We were able to pay them all the way through May. We were able to provide the equivalent of about either laptops directly or payment for laptops for about 500 laptops for students in spring. We've been able to put about $4 million in direct aid to students who've been impacted by COVID for students across the college, and some of them have used that for technology as well. We have a financial aid program directly for students who've been impacted by COVID that's rolling out for fall as well, that should help them with technology needs. So we strongly appreciated the partnership with Fort Collins community. We've worked with economic development on a number of initiatives. Appreciate our partnership with Colorado State, and I'm glad to be here and happy to answer any questions you have.